Okay, welcome to the first video in trying to understand how this software works, how you can be able to manage it yourself and be much more comfortable with automating some of your reporting. So the first thing is the data connections and importing. I'm going to go ahead and open up this file. So this is the beginning. We have a blank workbook status of funds that we're going to build from scratch into the product that we saw in the overall status of funds, and then we have our two data sources. A few things to note first. This is our BQ soft data out of CRIS. It comes in the form of a data table, which is what we want. And notice the tab name, soft refresh. That's actually the name of the query that I give it in CRIS. So that's important, and I'll show you a little bit more about that later. The second thing with your data, the DEAMS data. Anything that comes out of DEAMS is going to come out looking something like this, where it wants you to enable content, and it's got some blank rows, things like that. So the first thing you want to do is enable content, because there's macros that it's going to run. So you see how it's thinking here? It's running some things in the background, and it's going to format some of your headers, and that's fine. But what we want to do with respect to automating this, we're always going to want to enable content, or else it won't recognize this data as data when we try to pull it into Excel. And then we'll delete the top two rows, and in your status of funds, I'm going to hit Control and down arrow to go to the bottom. They try to subtotal for you at the bottom, and we don't want that either, so we're just going to delete that. Hit Control and Home to take us back to the top. This is typically what I'll do. Hit the Save button, and we're ready to go. So open up the status of funds. You can see I've got two sheets at the bottom here. I'm going to label this one BQ Soft Raw and DEAMS Soft Raw. Whatever you want to call it, it really doesn't matter. But just to keep them straight in your head, and just for the sake of consistency, I'm going to highlight both, right click, and make them red. So here we go. We're going to import our data. We're going to go to the data tab in the ribbon. There are a bunch of options, but just for what our purposes, we're just importing raw data. We're not doing anything to it. I'm going to hit existing connections, browse for more. It's going to force me to navigate all the way through the file path where these raw data is located. So I've done that, and I'm going to double click on my soft data. It's going to recognize that raw data that we had. It says first row's data contains column headers, which it does. I hit OK, and it's going to ask me in what format I'm going to pull it in. I want to pull it in as a table, so they're doing that for us. And hit OK. Comes in just the way we want it. Starts in A1, and we're ready to go. The next one in the DEAMS data, same thing. I'm going to go to the data tab, existing connections, browse for more. We'll get to our DEAMS soft data. Now if I hadn't have enabled content, this would not work. It would give me an error. But I'm going to double click. It does recognize that. We deleted those first two rows, so it's true the first row of data does contain our headers. And I'm going to hit OK. Pull it in as a data table, and this is exactly what we want. Now we've established a connection. If I go to data and connections, we see that we have our first two connections, and that's perfect. A few things I want to note out to you guys. In the properties, if we select properties and usage, this is where you can select things like refresh every so many minutes. I'm not going to touch any of that for now. And then definition, this one's the one you want to pay attention to. If you change the name of your queries, if you were to add a folder in the file path somewhere, so if in this file path, if you added a folder somewhere in between, that's going to break that data connection. It's not going to realize where it went potentially. So if you do any of those things, just go ahead and open up that browse for more, and then go find it again and reestablish that data connection, and that'll fix it for you. The other thing, that command text down here where it says soft refresh, again, it recognizes the name of your data and the data tables and the query names that you give it when it exports. In the DEAMS data, we don't have to worry about that as much because it comes out of DEAMS that way. It titles it for us, so to speak. We just need to make sure we enable content and then delete those rows like I showed you. So now that we've got our data connections done, if we want to refresh at any time, we can hit refresh all Just hit that and it just pulled all that data in again. We can hit this drop down and hit refresh all, or refresh the individual table, or we can go into the table itself and it gives us the option to just refresh this table, or right clicking and refresh. Any of those do work. But we've established our data connections, so we've accomplished this goal. See you in the next tutorial.